Lethal were formed back in 1982 in the neighborhood of Hebron, located in the US state Kentucky. The founding members were brothers Eric Cook, who would go on to play guitar, and Glenn Cook, who would go on to play bass. They would also be joined by drummer Jay Simpson and vocalist Brian Goins. Shortly thereafter, guitarist Chuck Goller would also join the band. Goller would go on to leave the band in 1983 and be replaced by Del Hull. This lineup would last until 1984, when vocalist Brian Goins was replaced with Tom Mallicoat. This lineup would actually go on to record a version of the later released The Arrival demo, but drummer Jay Simpson would leave the band and be replaced by Adrian Powers on the version that is available to the public. This was really their first stable lineup, and this is also the lineup that would go on to release the Arrival demo in 1987. The band had no support from a record label, and therefore they decided to do a self-released cassette containing 4 tracks. The 4 tracks included were Land of the Free, Just Before Dawn, Arrival, and Tomorrow's King. I think this is an incredible demo, and Tom Mallicoat's high-pitched vocals really gives off that US power metal and prog metal feel. If you're a fan of early Queensryche, you'll definitely appreciate this demo. I could easily highlight all the tracks on this demo, but let's take a listen to the 3rd track, which is also the title track. Because of this release, the band would gain quite a bit of traction and play a few live concerts. Then the most notable one would be on the 28th of November 1987 at Bogarts, located in Cincinnati in Ohio. Momentum was starting to build up for the band, and in 1988 they would be signed by the Los Angeles label Metal Blade Records. At this point, drummer Adrian Powers would go on to leave the band because he didn't want to commit to touring. He'd be replaced by drummer Jerry Hartman, and this lineup would go on to record their first full-length album, Programmed, that was released through Metal Blade Records in 1990. The album had 10 tracks, with one of them being taken from the 1987 demo, and that being the title track, which was track number 5. Stylistically, the band would follow in their previous footsteps, and I think they really hit the nail on the head with this release. The 8th track on the record even got its own music video.
Point of view, a playback was used. I tried to stop it mid-range, condemned to dust around.
The album was very well received, with a lot of people drawing parallels to Geoff Tate of Queensryche for pretty obvious reasons. I find the album to be very consistent, and I definitely think it's their magnum opus. The timing of the release was very unfortunate, with the musical landscape changing drastically over the next years, with genres such as grunge growing. I think the album would have been way bigger if it was released a few years earlier and maybe had a little bit more marketing. The band would continue to do live performances, with some of the noted ones once again being at Bogarts in Cincinnati, Ohio, for example on December 22nd, 1990 and on the 5th of April, 1992. Del Hull would go on to leave the band in 1991 and be replaced by David McElfresh, who would contribute significantly with material for their upcoming releases. The band would go on to give out a self-released cassette in 1991, and that was due to the fact that Programmed did not sell as well as anticipated, and therefore the band would lose their contract with Metal Blade Records relatively fast. This demo cassette would appropriately be titled Demo 91, and it would contain the 3 tracks Balancing Act, The Real, and Distortion. Although I find the demo to be solid and I can definitely still tell that it's lethal, I think it sort of acted as a bridge between the 1990 release Programmed and their later material, which was a bit more modern in the sound. This is a bit of a weird time in the band's history, with a lot of changes happening and everything being a little bit unclear, but the band would continue to play and write material, and in 1995 the band would end up at Bulletproof Records. In 1995, the band would release an EP titled Your Favorite God, and it had actually been released 1 year earlier in 1994, but only on cassette. And in 1995 it was released through Bulletproof Records on CD. In my opinion, this is a weird release in many ways, with a very strong first opening track, but then generally you can tell that the band has gone towards a more groove-oriented sound, kind of like Pantera, which I'm not a huge fan of. Let's start off by listening to the first track, which I really appreciate, and then I'll bring up some examples of tracks that are going towards this 90s sound that I'm not a huge fan of. In 1996, the band would be signed to the German metal label Massacre Records, and they would give out their last studio album, titled Poison Seed. Once again, the album leans heavily into that 90s metal sound, and this might even be more experimental than their previous EP. Let's take a listen to some examples of songs from this record. After this, the band would continue to play and do some live performances, for example one on December 12th, 1998 at Annie's in Cincinnati, Ohio. Their last performance that I was able to find some record of was at the Power Mad Festival in Baltimore, Maryland in 1999, and after this I think the band was practically done. A 7-year hiatus of the band would follow, and they wouldn't show any signs of life until 2006. Then, all of a sudden, the band would actually reunite, and it was kind of a coincidence, something that bassist Glenn Cook explains in an interview with Vampster in 2007. A staff member from a magazine contacted our guitarist Dave. He wanted to know what had become of Lethal, as the band hadn't been in the news for years. In a 2008 interview with Blabbermouth, drummer Jerry Hartman explained that the band members had been focusing on family and work. Glenn Cook continues to explain that the band realized that people were actually still interested in their music even after 10 years of silence, and thanks to the contact with that magazine staff member, the band would be invited to the 8th edition of the Keep It True Metal Festival in Germany in 2007. The band would say yes to this invitation and play a very praised concert on the 14th of April. Eric Cook described the show as one of the best they've ever played, and especially considering that the band had always wanted to visit Germany but haven't been able to. Just a few weeks prior to the festival, guitarist Eric Cook had suffered nerve damage in his hand and had limited strength, but miraculously recovered. Closely followed to their first concert in almost 10 years, they would play at the Chicago Powerfest in April of 2007, and they would continue to do live performances, such as one at the Headbangers Open Air in Germany in 2008. During this time, the band was even talking about releasing some new material. We are trying to put together an EP, maybe 5 to 8 songs, so that when we play the Open Air Fest, people will get some new material, referencing their performance at the Headbangers Open Air that I just mentioned. Eric continues to explain that the great thing about this new release is that some of the material are songs we played back during Programmed. Sadly, this release never saw the light of day. In 2012, tragedy struck the band when guitarist Eric Cook passed away on August 23rd after battling lung cancer. Although his friends were obviously devastated, they decided to carry on and keep playing the music that Eric had been such a big part of creating. In 2013, the band would bring on their new guitarist, Chris Brown. The band would continue doing live performances, such as one at the Southgate House Revival in Newport, Kentucky on January 5th, 2013. In 2016, guitarist Del Hull, who had been absent from the band from about 1991, would actually rejoin and start playing with the band once again. The band would keep on doing live performances, such as one at the Up the Hammers Festival in Greece on February 26, 2016. Drummer Jay Simpson, who had been out of the band since 1985, sadly passed away on October 24, 2023, and Eric Cook was even a groomsman at Simpson's wedding, proving how close they were. The band has continued to remain fairly active, with their last live performances I could find being at Annie's Music Center in Cincinnati, Ohio on Saturday, December 12, 2025. This really is a special band, and I think you should definitely check out their entire discography. And like I previously mentioned, if you're a fan of early Queensrÿche and bands such as Fate's Warning, there is a lot of joy to be had here. What I do know is that me and many other fans have not lost hope for a new release sometime in the future.